Welcome to the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this podcast features regular whiskey lovers just like you, tasting and rating whiskeys just like the judges do in whiskey competitions. We don't focus on the rare, expensive whiskeys that you'll likely never get to taste, but on accessible whiskeys that you should be able to find on the menu at a good whiskey bar or on the shelves at your local whiskey shop. This time around, our panelists come from the world of podcasting. We brought them together at the Podcast Movement 2018 conference in Philadelphia to taste Heaven Hill's Pikesville Rye, the Old Overholt Bottled in Bond Rye, and High West's 2018 edition of its Yippee Ki-Yay Rye. Later on, I'll tell you how to become one of our panelists for an upcoming episode. But right now, it's time to get started. We'll meet this month's tasting panel in just a minute. The WhiskyCast Tasting Panel is brought to you by the Whiskey Exchange, one of the world's leading online whiskey shops, and the hosts for The Whiskey Show, coming up September 29th and 30th in London. It's the 10th anniversary edition of The Whiskey Show, and you'll find whiskeys from all over the world to taste, along with a rare lineup of dream drams. Just a few of the whiskeys on that list: the Glenfarclas 40-year-old, a 38-year-old Glendronach distilled in 1978, the Dalmore's Quintessence single malt, and two different 25-year-old Springbanks, one bottled back in 2006, and a special edition bottled to celebrate longtime distillery manager Frank MacCready's 40th anniversary in the whiskey business. Tickets are still available for both days at Old Billingsgate on the banks of the River Thames. But those tickets won't last for long. You'll find them at whiskyshow.com, along with more details on the show. And if you can't make it to London that weekend, don't forget about the Whiskey Show Old and Rare Edition coming this February in Glasgow. They're both brought to you by the Whiskey Exchange, online at thewhiskeyexchange.com. Let's meet our tasting panel for this episode of WhiskyCast Tasting Panel. We are live at the Podcast Movement 2018 conference in Philadelphia, and we have a panel of podcasters here, along with one of our longtime listeners. And we're going to go around to the table first, and I'm going to start to my immediate left with Chris Liro, the only non-podcaster in the room, but Chris is a longtime WhiskyCast listener. Chris, tell us briefly about your history with whiskey.
Thank you, Mark. I'm Chris Liro. I've been probably a dabbler in whiskey for most of my adult life, but have really started to become more interested in it over the past 4 years or so. Had occasions where I would go out with friends, see a long list of whiskeys, and feel totally clueless and stupid. I figured it was time to educate myself. That's about when I started listening to your show. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, right across from me, Sean MacCready. Sean, tell us where you're from and tell us about your podcast.
Sure, I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I actually have two podcasts. The first one is the Philanthropy Podcast, which is best practices for nonprofit fundraisers, and a podcast I do with my wife, which is Two Shallow Divers, a scuba diving podcast.
Sounds cool. Which one do you have more fun with?
The one with my wife is definitely more fun. It's our anniversary today, so I damn well better answer that way.
Oh, yeah. Happy anniversary.
Congratulations.
Mike Joachim, and I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, you got it right.
Mike and I share a similar interest in IndyCar racing.
Yes.
And tell us about your podcast, Mike.
My podcast is solely focused on IndyCar. We do interviews, opinions, news. We get some big-name drivers on there or engineers on there almost every week. And you often find me at a racetrack.
And what's the name of the podcast?
Podcast is called Pit Lane Parlay, Parley. And
we do not want to forget that.
Yes, and that's also all of our social media.
And our last panelist is the most esteemed podcaster of the bunch. Elsie Escobar is a member of the Podcast Hall of Fame, among other things. And Elsie's reason for being here is because we've worked with Elsie's team at Libsyn since day one of WhiskyCast. 13 years ago in 2005. They are the service that brings you the episodes of WhiskyCast each week when you download them through iTunes or whatever. unless you're getting it from our website, you're getting it from Elsie's team at Libsyn. Thank you so much for joining us.
You are so welcome. This is so exciting. I'm not sure if I'm skilled, but hey, I will be tasting and giving you my opinions. Thank you so much for having me.
We have nothing to lose but our dignity.
That's
Go ahead.
already gone, Mark.
Go ahead and
Already
grab
gone.
that first glass, the one on your left, and I'll tell you briefly about it. It is the Pikesville Rye from Kentucky. It is made by Heaven Hill. It is 80 proof, bottled at 40% ABV, and we're going to have a little fun with this one because this is a legendary Maryland rye brand originally. The brand eventually moved over to Kentucky, but this should be an interesting one. Go ahead and get your noses in there and tell me what you smell. We'll explain the scoring scale real quickly here. Each of our panelists will score on a scale of 0 to 5 with half points. They will start off neat and then add a little bit of room temperature water to see what that does to the whiskey. At the end of the show, we will average up all the scores and declare a winner. So, what are you guys getting on this one? And there are no wrong answers here.
There's a little butter. There's a little bit of a buttery taste towards
Okay.
the end, or buttery,
Aroma?
aroma.
Sure.
Yeah, not taste. 'Cause I
we knew
can't
what you
taste
meant.
with my nose.
Actually, there are more receptors in your nose than in your tongue.
Look at that.
That's how most blenders
Education,
learn how to do
science.
this. Go ahead, Mike. What are you getting?
I'm going to agree with her.
Lean into the microphone, Mike.
I'm sorry. I'm going to agree. I forgot the microphone moved away from me. I'm going to agree with her. That's the one thing that really sticks out to me.
Okay. Sean?
You know, I'm not the best nose in the business, but is there like a kind of like almost like a fruit, like it almost smells like a cherry bit to me in there. I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm picking up on, but
There are no wrong answers here because each one of us has our own individual sense of smell. So if you get something, it's what you get. That's fine.
all right.
Chris?
And Mark, I'm picking up a little apricot as
Okay.
part of the fruit aroma that I'm getting. Also, I think the 80 proof, relatively low in the scheme of things, so I'm not being overpowered by the alcohol punching me in the face as I nose it.
Agreed.
Okay, go ahead and take a sip, guys. They're all in deep contemplation.
I've never had this much pressure while drinking whiskey.
I know. It's
Usually when I drink, it's just for fun. I've never been asked my thoughts about it before.
Well, what do you think?
It's good. You know, like Chris said, it's not too overpowering because it's lower in ABV. But I taste the fruit. You know that both Chris and Sean mentioned before. It's really good. I really like it.
Is the fruit more apparent on the palate than it was on the nose? Do you taste it more than you smelled it?
100%.
Absolutely. I agree with that as well.
I feel like it was equal. I feel like I
Okay.
had an equal one.
Chris?
And for me, I think I was getting more fruit on the nose. I'm getting a little more spice in the taste, a little hotness, as it were.
Okay, well, let's add a little bit of water, like a capful or so, and see what that does to it. While they're doing that, I do want to give a little bit of credit here to the folks at Talk Shoe and also Heil Sound for supplying all the equipment we're using for this episode here at the Philadelphia Downtown Marriott during Podcast Movement 2018. So does it smell any different with water? Does it open up a little bit? Maybe add some floral notes, a little spice?
It did. It did. It doesn't feel like it doesn't hit me as hard as the first scent or smell.
With the risk of repeating myself, what she said is completely accurate.
That's fine.
Yeah, it just it smells a little softened.
Okay. Chris?
And Mark, I definitely am picking up more of the floral nose with the water added. I don't have a good enough nose to tell you what type of flower, but it does smell like I'm in a flower garden.
And we should note that I am not drinking here because this is about you guys tasting and nosing, not me, because I know what this stuff tastes like. So let's go ahead and taste it now with the water. How does it taste? It should taste a little different than it did neat.
Yeah,
but
it's much softer. It actually is. It's much smoother. It's a much smoother. Obviously, the water, I'm sure, softens everything else, because the first taste it felt like, oh, this is nice. Poof. And then my face almost came off. And then I got really relaxed. This actually was a really nice, relaxing experience all the way around.
Okay. Sean?
Yeah, I felt like with taking it neat, I felt like I had a really strong flavor on the sides of my tongue. I felt like a lot of the kick to it there. With the cap full of water, it kind of smoothed over. I felt the palate across my whole tongue. But the flavor was just, again, a little smoother.
Okay. Mike?
It was very comforting. Just that drink, with the water, smoother, like everybody said, but it just was a nice drink that I could imagine, sitting out on the deck after a long day of work. That's not too overpowering.
Chris?
I agree with all that. The water definitely took the edge off. I felt a little less heat, less spice, and it made it more soft and a more relaxing drink.
Great. Do we like this one?
Yes.
Yes, I do. I actually can. I can still feel the scent. I mean, whatever that
Okay.
is. Like, I'm not sure the fruit, what they were talking about before. So it's really nice. It lingers.
Okay.
Yeah, the combination, I feel like it feels like a good outdoor drink. I think of like ski trips. This is something, especially with the cap full of water, I'd like to sip outside after a day of skiing.
Great. Let's write down our scores. Once again, 0 to 5 with half points in between if you like. And we will move on to our second whiskey. This one is a little bit stronger. This is the Old Overholt Bottled in Bond Rye. It's at least 4 years old. They don't put an age statement on it. It is bottled at 50%. And this one comes from the Jim Beam Distillery in Kentucky. And once again, we'll repeat the process. Get your noses in there and tell us what you think.
I'm not noticing as much of a smell on this one.
Okay.
Not as strong of a scent.
This is like vanilla. It's what as soon as I smelled it, it was like very vanilla-ish.
Okay, that would come from the wood. Good.
I feel like I'm in a candle shop right now with like the vanilla type smell from this one, or I feel like if I burn this on fire, it should light up the room like a vanilla smell.
Okay.
That might be the most ridiculous comparison you've ever heard, so I'm
No,
sorry.
we've heard worse. I've given worse.
They've heard worse. You're safe. I know.
I agree with the vanilla candle aroma. I also picked up, when I first smelled it, a little grapefruit kind of fruit, but that sort of went away a little bit after I stuck my nose in it a little longer.
Okay. And Sean?
I was trying to get something. There was a citrusy kind of bit there. Again, not the greatest with naming my fruits, but that's one I noticed.
Okay. Let's go ahead and taste it a little bit. What do you think?
It's definitely, on the lighter side. I don't think it's too overpowering.
Okay.
I was expecting a punch. Again, like the first one. The first one that I drank, I remember I drank and then it was like, poof. Like it exploded and then it calmed down. This one was pretty smooth the entire way around. It felt like it was already neat.
Okay.
I agree with the smoothness. Even though this is 100 proof, it still is not too overpowering. I'm picking up a little black pepper taste, but not quite the spicy heat as the first one.
Okay. Let's try it with a little. Go ahead and taste it. You've already tasted it, right? Yes, I'm sorry about that. Go ahead and add a little bit of water here.
Mark, as a true novice, I know with no water is referred to as neat. Is
Right.
there a way to describe with just the splash of water?
Just a splash of water, basically.
That's just it?
That's
All right.
just it, just a splash of water.
No fancy technical term with that one.
No, just a few drops of water is really all you need to open the flavors up most of the time and have a little fun with it and see what else a whiskey does, because that little chemical reaction as the water hits it creates a little bit of heat, releases molecules and aroma flavors that you might not get otherwise.
You know, with the water with this one, it didn't necessarily open up the aroma. It felt like it diluted it a little bit, is what I sensed. It wasn't like, oh, soft, like that vanilla seems to have sort of disappeared.
Okay.
I agree with that. Definitely a more washed out aroma for me too.
Mike?
Yeah, I would agree with both of them. It didn't change the taste a whole lot to me because it's already a softer drink to begin with. And the vanilla smells kind of went away a little bit.
Sean?
Yeah, I agree with it almost went too soft. The first one, I felt like the water made it more enjoyable. This one, I would have preferred it neat. I preferred it with a little stronger flavor behind it.
Let's taste it and see see whether that changes your opinions at all.
I got excited and drank it already.
What'd you think?
Me too.
I thought we were supposed to drink that one already.
Okay.
It's still very good, very very soft. Almost a little too diluted. I think I would prefer it without the water.
Okay.
Still, all in all, a very good drink.
Guys?
Yeah, I agree. Prefer it without the water. Did take the opportunity to pretty much finish off the glass here, and
Of course.
and I'm enjoying both the whiskey though and the envious stares that I'm noticing.
Yes. We should explain that we are in the middle of a conference
That's
hall
right.
in the hallway here, and probably really shouldn't be doing this in the middle of a hotel lobby, but we're getting away with it.
I mean, this is also Philadelphia. We do this a lot around the city.
We just don't admit it very much.
Right. But yes, I actually agree. I would prefer not having water in this one as
Okay.
well. It kind of washed out the vanilla the from before and the flavorful in my experience of it. So it brought out the alcohol taste.
Yeah.
Actually. So.
Okay. Chris?
I also preferred it without the water, and even though it was a higher proof, I think it stood up to the water a little less than the Pikesville did.
Okay, let's write down our scores for the Old Overholt Bottled in Bond. And we will move on to our third and final whiskey. This one's a bit different. This is from High West in Utah. It's the 2018 edition of Yippee Ki-Yay rye whiskey.
I like the name.
This one is named, it's an annual release. It is created by taking older rye whiskeys from the MGP distillery in Indiana and the Barton distillery in Kentucky. And until this year, those were the two whiskeys they blended together. This year, High West finally has its own rye whiskey distilled in Utah, in Park City, that is old enough to be included as a straight whiskey at least 2 years old. So they've now added this is about 20% or so of the blend in this year's edition of Yippee Ki-Yay. They then take the whole thing and finish it in a combination of vermouth and Syrah wine casks. So this is going to have a different flavor than what you've tried with the other two. Let's go ahead and get the noses deep into the glass this time.
Oh, wow, deep into the glass.
Yes, deep into the glass. And tell me what you think. This should have a lot more fruitiness to it.
Very, very fruity.
Yeah, I'm
I
certainly
don't smell a lot of alcohol. Like the overall alcohol doesn't overwhelm me.
This, by the way, is bottled at 46% ABV. It is a little less strong than the one you just tried, than the Old Overholt.
certainly picking up the vermouth aroma coming through on the nose. That really stands through for me.
Sean?
Agreed, picked a little bit of that up, and I'm not a big fan of vanilla smells, so this smell is actually my favorite of the three so far.
Elsie?
Right. It's very. It is very. It's not like fruity or flowery. I feel that there's an evenness to this smell that I really appreciate this one a lot. It's my favorite smell, I think.
Okay.
Also.
Let's see if you like the taste just as much. Once again, everyone is in deep contemplation as the crowd walks by, looking on, going, "What the hell are they doing? Yeah, what the hell are they doing?"
Did you guys see that lady staring for like 45 seconds? She was over here to my right about a minute ago.
And going, "What are they doing? And why didn't we get to do this?"
I know exactly. That's what's going down.
Okay, so what do you think of the taste?
I probably am in the minority here, but I think this is my least favorite out of the three. It's not bad. I just don't really love the fruitiness of it.
Okay.
I kind of really do. I do like it. I like this one. Probably from this taste, I think I like this one maybe the best. I'm gonna have to wait it out just a moment.
Sean?
This is right behind the Pikesville for me on taste so far. I liked it. I felt like it had a little more flavor than the Old Overholt, but yeah, I'm excited to see how it opens up.
Chris?
I definitely taste the Syrah tasting it. I like it, but I think while the finishing and the vermouth and the Syrah barrels makes it interesting, I think my preference is for the more straightforward rye than the finished product.
Okay. Everybody's putting their water in now and shaking the glasses.
Do a stretch before this one.
Just a little bit here. Does the water make a difference to you? And feel free to go ahead and taste it this time.
Yeah, I think the water really rounded out
I got
the
excited
flavor
and
a
drank
little
it
more. Again, I've tasted it across my taste
okay.
buds.
You're doing
across
both
a
now.
broader spectrum, I feel like.
Okay. Chris
And
is
Mark,
doing
I
this
do
again.
like the water as far as the taste goes. It does mellow it out a little bit. I think it extended the finish a little bit more for me.
Okay.
It extended some of the softness, although it made it slightly, I'm not sure what the word would be. I'm not sure if it's proper to say bitter. Like there was a sense of bitterness towards the end of
that's
it that I
fine.
was like, oh, I wasn't sure that was something that I wasn't expecting.
Was it like a
that at all.
citrusy tartness maybe?
Maybe that's what it is.
Because
Like
you
I
might get
could
like a
feel
little bit of lemon maybe?
Yeah, I felt the outsides of my tongue go clink,
Yeah,
like just
that would be a lemony taste or
Yeah.
like a citrus, like
Yeah.
an orange
The way
peel or something like that.
the way you just described it is exactly what I would think. The water definitely made it a little bit better to me, although I still might not consider it my favorite of the three. The water definitely helped mellow it out a little bit.
Okay, well, let's write down our scores for the High West Yippee Ki-Yay Straight Rye Whiskey Blend. Those are our three whiskeys. We're going to take a quick break and come back with the scores and some final comments. You're listening to the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel. One of the best ways to enjoy great whiskey is with good friends. And each episode, we honor one of the many whiskey clubs around the world as our Whiskey Club of the Month in partnership with Glencairn Crystal. Congratulations to the North Shore Whiskey Club in Boston, Massachusetts. The club has been around since 2014, and here's how they describe themselves on their website. An eclectic band of marauding skinflints forever seeking gratis tastings and the eternal buzz, while disseminating questionable whiskey knowledge. Okay. Right now, they're currently planning a trip to the UK next June to tour distilleries in Scotland and watch their beloved Boston Red Sox play the New York Yankees in London. We'll be sending them 24 WhiskyCast Glencairn glasses to use at their future club tastings. If you're part of a whiskey club and would like to be considered for Club of the Month honors on a future episode of the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel, just send us an email. The address is comments@whiskycast.com and tell us about your club. If you have a website, we'll also add it to our Whiskey Club's page in the pub section at whiskycast.com. Who knows? You might just be our next Whiskey Club of the Month. Once again, congratulations to the North Shore Whiskey Club, and thanks to Glencairn Crystal for helping us honor the Whiskey Club of the Month. And welcome back to the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel. This is probably one of our closest results in a long time.
wow.
We had a tie for second and third between the Old Overholt Rye, the bottled and bond version, and the High West Yippee Ki-Yay. Both had a 3.5 average score from our four panelists. The winner was the Pikesville Rye with a 4.0 average. Does that surprise any of you guys?
Wait, which one was it?
The
I'm
Pikesville.
not sure.
The Pikesville, the first one. The
Drink number one.
Pikesville.
Oh, yes. No. That's my favorite.
Why was it your favorite, Elsie?
You know, after I actually stayed away from doing all the scores until I was done, and there was just something very reminiscent of my time in theater when I used to do theater professionally for a long time, and after every show we would drink whiskey. Like it would be like it just remember in Colorado. I remember at the Denver Center Theater Company, and that's the one that reminded me the most of those times. It was kind of very oaky, very grounded, very fiery, very just reminiscent of those times. And I don't know, I really loved that first one.
Great. Anybody else picked that one as their favorite? I think you did, Sean, right?
I did. I definitely felt that this one, I liked the kind of earthy flavor of it. I felt like it had more flavor, and I often think of where I'm sharing a drink in context of location and feel, and I felt like this would be one that if I was drinking it, I would be surrounded by friends, and it would be the type of drink that you'd be talking about the flavor. Whereas the other two, I felt like you might be sipping and enjoying, but this one carried the most.
Okay, we only have a couple of minutes left. Mike, any final thoughts?
I'll wrap it up real quick. My favorite was the second one, but the Pikesville Rye is definitely a good winner. Both were really enjoyable to me.
Chris, any final thoughts?
No, I enjoyed the Pikesville was my number one too. It was a little surprising. I think normally I think of myself as liking a higher proof whiskey, but there was just something about the flavor. It was interesting, and at the end of the day, it was the one I enjoyed the most.
Well, guys, I want to thank all of you for doing this. It has been a lot of fun, and I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Mark.
much.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks and cheers, guys. Once again, our panelists were Mike Joachim, Elsie Escobar, Chris Liro, and Sean MacCready. Special thanks go to Heil Sound and TalkShoe for providing the remote equipment we used to record our panel at the Podcast Movement 2018 conference in Philadelphia. If you're into podcasting or just want to learn more about it, the Podcast Movement 2019 conference will be held next August in Orlando, Florida. Now, if you'd like to be a panelist for an upcoming episode of the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel, all you have to do is send us an email. The address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let us know where you live and whether you have Skype on your computer. That's how we bring our panelists together for virtual tastings. But if we are going to be in your area, we might just bring you and some other whiskey lovers together for an in-person tasting. That email address again is comments@whiskycast.com. That's also where you can share your comments about the show, and I hope you'll also share the WhiskyCast Tasting Panel with your friends too. You can help other whiskey lovers discover the show by leaving ratings or reviews for us at Apple Podcasts, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to join us each week for the latest whiskey news and more cask-strength conversation on WhiskyCast. The WhiskyCast Tasting Panel is brought to you by The Whiskey Exchange, one of the world's leading online whiskey shops at thewhiskyexchange.com. The WhiskyCast Tasting Panel is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2018. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.